Have you ever wondered whether ancient Egypt was truly the first great civilization, or simply the first one whose story survived the passage of time? Imagine standing inside a temple built more than 3,000 years ago, staring at a wall covered in carefully carved hieroglyphs that most visitors walk past without giving them a second glance. What if those carvings weren't just celebrating Egypt's kings and recording their achievements, but quietly preserving the memory of societies that existed long before the pyramids ever rose above the desert? Today, we're going to explore one of the most fascinating claims surrounding ancient Egypt, a series of inscriptions that some researchers believe describe 5 earlier civilizations, each meeting a very different fate. Whether these inscriptions are misunderstood historical records, symbolic traditions, or echoes of forgotten events that survive through ancient stories, you'll see every piece of the puzzle before deciding for yourself what they might truly represent. For generations, Egypt has stood at the beginning of recorded civilization. Its monuments, writing system, and centralized government appear in history books almost as if they emerged fully formed. Massive stone temples, a sophisticated calendar, complex mathematics, and an elaborate bureaucracy all seem to arrive with astonishing speed. To many historians, this reflects centuries of gradual development that simply haven't survived in the archaeological record, leaving only the final stages visible today. But to others, a different possibility exists. They suggest that Egypt may have inherited fragments of knowledge, traditions, or ideas from cultures that disappeared long before the first dynasty. This idea isn't based on a single mysterious inscription or one isolated artifact discovered in an ancient ruin. Instead, it comes from comparing several ancient Egyptian records that appear to preserve traditions reaching back beyond the reigns of the earliest pharaohs. Among the most frequently discussed are the inscriptions inside the Temple of Seti I at Abydos, the Turin King List, and the Palermo stone. Each of these documents serves a different purpose and was created in a different context. Yet together, they have inspired decades of debate about Egypt's understanding of its own distant past and the traditions it chose to preserve. The Temple of Seti I is famous for its king list, a carefully carved sequence of Egyptian rulers that historians have studied for generations. Yet researchers interested in alternative interpretations often point to lesser-known sections of the temple, suggesting that some inscriptions have received far less attention than the celebrated royal lists. These claims remain controversial, largely because many of the proposed translations differ significantly from those accepted by mainstream Egyptology. Still, the mystery continues to attract attention because the inscriptions appear to reference figures or groups existing before the familiar dynastic timeline begins, raising questions that continue to be debated today. The Turin King List adds another layer to the discussion. Although damaged and incomplete after thousands of years, it preserves the names of rulers stretching far beyond what many people expect. Ancient Egyptian tradition occasionally speaks not only of human kings, but also of divine beings and legendary predecessors. Conventional scholars generally interpret these passages as mythological or symbolic, reflecting religious beliefs rather than literal political history. Alternative researchers, however, argue that these entries preserve memories of genuine administrations that became increasingly mythologized over thousands of years as the stories were passed down through generations. The Palermo stone raises similar questions. This fragmented monument records royal events year by year, documenting ceremonies, taxation, floods, and other administrative details. Its style demonstrates how carefully the Egyptians recorded important information and preserved official records. Because of this precision, some researchers wonder whether references to earlier rulers in related traditions might also deserve closer examination. Even if those ancient accounts mixed history with legend, they may still preserve echoes of real events buried beneath centuries of storytelling and tradition. One of the most intriguing words associated with these discussions is often translated as referring to those who came before. In ordinary Egyptian administrative language, similar expressions could simply indicate predecessors, people who occupied a position before someone else. That seemingly simple meaning has fueled enormous speculation. If the inscriptions truly describe predecessors, who exactly were they? Were they legendary ancestors, symbolic founders, or rulers belonging to cultures that vanished before recorded Egyptian history truly began. Among the names that repeatedly appear in these debates are the Shemsu Hor, often translated as the followers of Horus. In accepted Egyptology, they are generally understood as mythical or semi-divine rulers, occupying the transition between gods and historical kings. Yet alternative interpretations suggest something far more literal. According to these readings, the followers of Horus governed a recognizable territory before Egypt emerged as a unified kingdom, preserving a memory that may have survived in later Egyptian traditions. Some researchers believe descriptions connected to this first group hint at communities established near extensive bodies of water, possibly along coastlines or large river systems. If true, that detail immediately raises another important question. What eventually became of them, and why did they disappear from history? Supporters of this theory point toward the dramatic environmental changes occurring near the end of the last ice age. As enormous glaciers melted across the planet, sea levels rose by well over 100 meters over thousands of years. Coastlines that once supported human settlements slowly disappeared beneath advancing oceans. Entire landscapes that had existed for countless generations were transformed forever, leaving little trace of the people who may once have lived there. Today, underwater archaeology has confirmed that many prehistoric coastlines now lie far below modern sea level. Around the world, traces of submerged settlements continue to be discovered beneath coastal waters, reminding researchers that ancient communities once occupied areas now hidden beneath the sea. While none of these finds directly confirm the existence of an advanced civilization preceding Egypt, they do demonstrate that countless ancient settlements were indeed lost as the seas advanced and coastlines gradually changed. Viewed through that lens, stories describing a coastal society overwhelmed by water become slightly less mysterious. They no longer sound entirely impossible. Instead, they begin to resemble cultural memories of genuine environmental catastrophes that may have been passed from one generation to another before eventually becoming part of Egypt's oldest traditions and historical narratives. Whether that connection is real remains impossible to prove with certainty. Ancient inscriptions rarely provide the level of detail modern historians would like to see. They often compress entire eras into only a handful of lines, leaving enormous gaps open to interpretation. Yet this uncertainty is exactly what keeps the debate alive. Every surviving inscription becomes another clue in a puzzle that refuses to fit neatly together, encouraging both historians and researchers to continue searching for answers. The second civilization described in alternative readings presents a remarkably different picture. Rather than disappearing beneath rising waters, this group is associated with authority, organization, and governance. Their descriptions emphasize order, stability, and administration instead of exploration or movement. According to some interpretations, their settlements occupied higher ground, suggesting that they may have intentionally chosen locations believed to be safer from flooding and other natural threats. If that reading is correct, then their ending becomes even more fascinating. Instead of describing destruction by water, certain translations suggest the land itself turned against them. At first glance, that sounds almost poetic, but geology reminds us that the ground beneath our feet is never truly still. Earthquakes, fault movements, and soil liquefaction have devastated civilizations throughout history. Entire cities have collapsed within minutes as stable foundations suddenly behaved like liquid, forcing people to abandon places that had once seemed secure. Even regions considered relatively stable today preserve evidence of ancient seismic activity that dramatically altered the surrounding landscape. Across northeastern Africa and neighboring regions, researchers have identified prehistoric seismic events capable of reshaping valleys, redirecting waterways, and rendering established settlements uninhabitable. Once again, there is no direct evidence linking these events to any specific civilization mentioned in Egyptian tradition. Nevertheless, the possibility encourages continued discussion among those searching for historical foundations beneath legendary accounts and ancient stories. This pattern is what makes the broader theory so compelling. Each proposed civilization is associated not simply with a name, but with a different kind of ending. Instead of repeating the same catastrophe again and again, the traditions appear to describe entirely separate challenges. Whether these represent literal history or symbolic storytelling remains one of the greatest unanswered questions, and the available evidence continues to be interpreted in different ways. And as the sequence continues, the third civilization introduces something even more surprising, not a story about destruction, but one centered on knowledge itself. According to some interpretations, this society wasn't remembered primarily for its monuments or military power. Instead, it was remembered because it kept records, and because those records may have outlived the civilization that first created them.